Right. Looks like we are finally live. Let me make sure that this is up on boom. All right. Okay, this works. So today we are analyzing a duplex deal here in St. Louis. This is just in this area called Florissant, which is just outside of St. Louis. When you kind of zoom in this little area, what I like about here is like there's tons of restaurants out here. There is a Starbucks right here. So sometimes people always suggest like, hey, you see a Target or you see a Starbucks. Generally, those are good areas to at least kind of pay attention to, because usually these corporations have done some sort of demographic study to figure out whether or not this is a viable market to at least invest in terms of population, job growth, and disposable income. So this property is a duplex. This is a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and a 3-bedroom, 2 bath. So we haven't analyzed a duplex a lot lately, so figure we would just kind of practice a duplex today. One thing that we typically do is we always kind of drive around the street on Google Maps just to kind of make sure that there aren't a lot of boarded up homes in this area. I have been paying attention to this area. Looks like this is like a dead end cul-de-sac. I'm not seeing a lot of boarded up homes or anything. And I kind of like that. Technically, there's some retail and commercial properties right out here, so you can find jobs and food nearby. So this seems like a solid area. Let's look at some of the photos because I want to see the general condition of the home. The flooring looks fine. Yeah, there's no carpet here. Oh, I don't know what's going on with this floor. This floor is not my style. I'll probably replace the flooring in that area. What's going on here? What is it? Oh, this is the garage. Okay, so that's a garage. It's just been patched up and put a lot of drywall on here. So for some reason, I was only able to see this is the living room. This is 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms. Is that the same bedroom? No, that's a different bedroom. That's a 3-bedroom right there. Okay, because I'm noticed that it's a different bedroom because it's missing a ceiling fan, and I'm assuming this is the other room up here. So I'm missing a room right now, and I have no idea what's going on. So I'm gonna be a little bit more conservative in my rehab estimates when I'm looking at this property. But that's okay. We're just gonna go through the properties and see what's going on. All right. So the first thing we do for every single property is we have to go get the fair market rents, and you can do that by googling HUD FMR, HUD, and then FMR. Then we'll go to the small area FMRs. FMR stands for fair market rents. So usually these are the ceiling rents that the federal government has determined by HUD as the maximum rents, quote unquote, for your area. So in this area, I want to look for the rents, FMRs, for 2-bedroom and 3 bedrooms. And I want to note these numbers down. So I got 1810 here. I want to write down the 2-bed, which is 1400. 1400. Okay. So I have the HUD rents now. What I want to do next is get the market rents. Okay. In order for me to get the market rents, I go to affordablehousing.com, and then I go to the owner's market rent estimator section. Once I get here, I can plug in the address for each of the respective bedrooms that I'm looking at renting out. So first, I'm going to start with the 2-bedroom counts, and I want to understand how much are these properties renting out for based on the market. So I usually look at this number right here, within a 0.48 mile radius for 25 units. The average rent for a 2-bedroom was $924. So let me make sure I write this down on my spreadsheet just so my partners can understand just exactly what the market rents are. Let me put this to the side so I can just kind of like note all this stuff over here. 1166, 1105, and then 1287. This is for a 2-bedroom. Delete that. And then I want the 3-bedroom count. And the reason I want to get all these numbers is usually there is a test. It's called the rent reasonable test, which means that, hey, The market rent right now for this 3-bedroom property on average within a 0.5 mile radius for 25 units is $14.50 for 3 bedrooms. So even though the HUD FMR, the ceiling rents, quote unquote, is $18.10, the housing authority might say, I am not going to allow you to rent it out for $8 simply because it's a Section 8 housing choice voucher holder. It's $14.50. We're going to pay you $14.50 because that's what the market rent dictates. So sometimes you can't always assume that you're going to get the best case scenario here using the FMR that's dictated by the property. Now, you can always give a quick call to your housing authority and say, hey, how can I get a rent above market rent? Is it amenities? Is there fixtures? Is there a number of bathrooms? Like, what constitutes a rent and justifies a rent that's a little bit higher than what I'm seeing in the market? And that usually is information that you will not find online unless you actually talk to your local public housing authority, which stands for PHA 1472. Okay, cool. So I have my rents now. And what I want to do is, well, let me look at just using the bottom rent as my worst case scenario. So 924 plus 1450 equals 924 plus 1450. So I'll be renting out this property at 2374. Okay, let's put in our purchase price now for this property. The purchase price here on this property is $230,000. Okay, 230,000. Let's grab the property taxes, which is $249,249, and my insurance for this property is $169. So usually these insurance estimates are assuming like it's a primary residence home. So I just want to make sure I add a 20% premium by multiplying it by 1.2. Once I do that, I get a little bit higher insurance premium because I want to be conservative with my estimates so that I should get a decent cash flow estimate for what this property might yield on this property. Okay. So I have 10% for my war chest, which simply means that I'm setting aside 10% of my rents every single month in anticipation that something will need to get replaced, repaired, whatever. It could be the roof, water heater, HVAC, it does not matter, but that is money that does not belong to you. I see this often where people will present a deal and say, hey, my principal, interest, taxes, and insurance number is this amount number, and my rent is this number. So for example, they might say, hey, PI TI is 1778. My rent is 2374. So my cash flow every single month is about $600. That is not true. That's not how it works, because you know something eventually breaks in your home at some point and needs to get replaced. So that money does not realistically belong to you. You have to set aside money in anticipation of something needs to get repaired. All right. So we set aside another 8% for property management fees and another 3% for vacancy, because eventually someone moves out of your home. I might even bump this up to a 4% just because this is not a single family home. I'm going to assume that there's going to be a little bit more vacancy in the home just because usually a single family home might have a little bit longer tenancy just because that's what certain residents want, because they want their own property and want their own home. Okay. So right now I am assuming a 25% down payment. So our down payment is 230 times 0.25, which is 57,500. Our closing cost for this property, I have 2.5%, which is about 5,750. And I got renovation. So let's actually look at the renovation. So I think right now, as I go through this list, I will have some capital dedicated towards roof repairs in case there's something that in there that I cannot see for $1,500. I'm setting aside at least $500 for the landscaping. What I saw earlier, it seems like I need to repaint the entire place and put some drywall up. And hopefully that will cover, even though the home looks in decent shape, like someone just was recently living here, looks like it's been painted. There was some, I think this is a garage, but what I'm going to do is assume that I need to repaint the entire house because this needs to get repainted. I just can't tell if they're assuming this is a room or whatnot, but I want to assume that I need to repaint the place just in case the pictures do not reflect what the actual condition of the home actually is. So $17.99, I'm just going to plug in the square footage there. All right. And then I remember that there was a part of the floor where I needed to replace the floor. So I'm going to assume that was about about 25% of the square footage. So I'm going to divide that by 4 for the renovation. Again, I'm just using estimates, guys, right? It's not it's more of an art than a science, but I'm trying to be conservative just simply based off an underwrite from a pure virtual perspective. Okay. As I go down here, I put in a probably new sink because I learned that from Ashley Hamilton on one of our podcasts. Do I need a new vanity? I don't think I need new vanity. That's probably okay. Um, I can't see the other bathroom though, so I'm gonna leave in one vanity, one mirror, one sink, and one toilet, just in anticipation that there's something that I cannot see from the lack of photos in this area. Um, walls, 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 walls. I think it sounds like there is this area that needs complete drywall. So let's see. This area right here. I'm assuming this is about like 300 square feet. Well, you only need drywall up here, so maybe 150. So, because I don't really do that, this might just be paint at that point in time. So I'm gonna do 150 square foot of a wall. Okay, 825. That's good enough for me because I already counted painting and this stuff earlier. I'm assuming I do not need a mini split system. I'm assuming the water heater is working as intended because someone looks like they were just living in it. I'm going to assume that there are no termite issues. And if there are, I will get that in a concession from the seller. So this brings me to a total rehab number of about 17,725 for this property. Now, as you can see, right now, I'm underwriting a property using 25% down, 2.5% closing costs, and $17K for my renovations. I am assuming that I'm going to finance the rest of this property at $172,000 at 8.5% interest rate. Okay. For those of you that are still watching, you can go to youtube.com/@cat_HE if you want to watch the full screen version for this live stream. And we are going to keep on going. So right now at 2,374 for rent, 2,374, I'm going to cash flow $8, a whole whopping $8, which means it's a 0.1% cash and cash return. This was assuming a $230,000 purchase price and assuming it was a 25% down at 8.5% interest rate. Okay. Let's do my best case scenario, which I think is going to be 90% of 1810 and 90% of 1400. So I'm going to plug in this formula in equals 0.9 times 1810 plus 0.9 times 1400. Did I get that right? 1400, 1810 and 1400. Great. So if this is my ceiling rent at 2,889, this is now a $410 cash flow. And I'm going to assume my cash and cash return is 6.1%. Again, this is the same purchase price at 25% down, 8.5% interest rate. Cool. All right. Next thing we want to do is, well, right now this is not ideal. If I'm trying to reach my goal of 70% cash and cash return, what does that yield? All right. Well, we are going to do 200 grand. Let's see what that takes us. 200 out. That's not good enough. 150, 155. All right, that's probably as close as I can. So at $155,000 for this property, I can get this deal at $842. This will cash flow $842. I mean, sorry, 2,889 is my best case scenario for this property. And my cash and cash return right now would be about 16.8%. This is assuming 25% down at 8.5% interest rate. All right. So for me, this would be the scenario where it is considered a deal for my investment criteria. Now, again, is not soliciting for any investments. I am not asking for anything. I'm simply doing the work, analyzing a deal every single day and talking about how we analyze deals. Okay. So let's go back to $230,000. Now, the reason I want to go into this next is one, when I looked at this property on PropStream, I was looking to see whether or not there is another underlying mortgage on this property. When you put in an address and you go to mortgage transaction history, usually if there is a underlying mortgage, you would see that here. Right now, this does not exist. So this home does not have an underlying mortgage. All right. Well, if that's the case, What if the seller decides to seller finance a deal to you? Because they might have had this property on the market for way too long. It's only been on 14 days, so it's not too long yet. So you got to wait on this one for them to actually accept a creative finance deal. But if I were to say, hey, I will give you a 20% down payment on the home. So let's write down these scenarios. Point two. What interest rate would I need from the seller, assuming I'm going to give them the price that they want at $230,000 to make this a deal for me? Well, if I adjust the interest rate to 0%, 1.5%, 2.5%, 3%, well, 2.75. And that's probably it. So if I'm able to get a 20% down at 2.75% interest rate, this gives me a purchase price of $230,000. And this gives me a cash and cash return of 17%. And this will cash flow $985 a month. And this is assuming 2889 there. Okay. So this is where I have to get comfortable with the deal. This meets my criteria. But what if I only got 2374? 2374. If I say the market rent is 2374, at this point, I'm still getting a 10%, assuming everything else is still the same for purchase price, down payment, 2374. And now I am 584 cash flow a month. Cash and cash return is 10.1% at 2.75% interest rate. Let me kind of put this back out. Let me put these decimals in there. Boom. All right. Well, using my worst case scenario, what might that be? Well, 2374 only gives me 10%. What if I got this at principal only payments at 0%? Well, that would still get me a 14% return on my money, $230,000 purchase price, 20% down, and this is 0% interest rate. And this gives me a cash flow of 823, and this was assuming 2374. So now you have gone through all these different scenarios, and you have an idea like, well, this deal could work for me if that's my best case scenario, because that was my worst case scenario. My worst case scenario in that scenario, if I got it 2.75%, assuming 20% down, my quote unquote worst case scenario is a 10% cash and cash return. That might be a deal for you. That's not a deal for me, but it's also makes me feel a little bit more comfortable that my projected return, even in my quote unquote worst case scenario, is still a 10% return. That allows me to pull the trigger on a deal like this if I'm able to get a seller finance deal for 20% down at 2.75% interest rate. So this is sort of the scenario that I go through personally to figure out at what point is this still a deal? Because what if you enter the deal and you're in escrow and you find out something during the inspection period? Now all of a sudden it's still a deal. Well, what if you increase your rehab, right? You might have another column for rehab. And this was always assuming that the rehab was 17,724. Well, as you go through all these different scenarios, you might say, well, what if my rehab all of a sudden went to $20,000, right? So let's go back to the previous scenario. Let's look at this one where it was definitely a deal at 2889 for the rent. And we're 20% down at 2.75% interest rate, 2.75. That equals 985, right? Well, what if all of a sudden there was something really, really big that came up that was not a deal? Well, if your rehab went up by another $10,000, that's no longer a deal. Unless you tell the seller, hey, Mr. Seller, you need to turn this down to a 1.25% interest rate. Because now all of a sudden my rehab is now 27,724. I now have a 1.25% interest rate, 20% down, $230,000. My rent is still 2,889, the best case scenario. And now I am cash flowing 1,123, which still yields a 17% return. Now, that's why I needed a higher cash and cash return or a cash and cash yield nominal value wise, because my rehab has gone up. For me to achieve the similar returns I'm looking for, I need the interest rate to drop from 2.75 from that prior scenario to 1.25. All right. So this was the underwriting process. We underwrite and analyze the deal every single day. The whole reason I do this is so that you guys can learn from the videos and learn to come up with your own scenarios on what constitutes as a deal for you. So when you go and negotiate and you put in some offers, what does that offer actually look like? And is it going to make it a deal? So hopefully this was helpful. I do this every single day for affordable housing and real estate investment community. If you want to join, just DM me the word affordable. I will invite you to our free Facebook group. It's called Affordable Housing Real Estate Investing. The whole goal behind the community is so that we can learn from one another, share resources with one another, and really help remove the fear so that we can all get a little bit more comfortable about investing in affordable housing. Because right now we're on a mission to create the largest affordable housing investment community in the United States. And this is how we truly, truly solve for the affordable housing crisis by helping one another and working with one another. We can do this. It's a large problem, so it requires massive amounts of action and massive amounts of support from one another. So I'm doing my part by showing you guys how I analyze deals every day. It's a great habit. One of the biggest excuses I hear from people is like, hey, I don't have capital. Well, you got to raise capital. Well, how do you raise capital? Well, how do you even know what's a deal? How can someone trust you what's a deal if you haven't and cannot even show how many deals you have analyzed? So I hope that you guys can take the same deals that I've been looking at, same spreadsheets, same properties, put it onto your own YouTube channel, put it up there. And then this way you can have an undeniable track history of all the deals that you have looked at that were not deals before you actually figure out what was a deal. So this was an amazing Wednesday. Happy hump day, everybody. If you guys need the spreadsheet, just DM me on Instagram on at invest with Kent INVESTWITH. KENTHE, and I can email you guys the spreadsheet. I've been fortunate enough to have been given these spreadsheets so that I can ultimately decide how to evaluate my criteria, and I have modified every single spreadsheet to kind of fit what I need from my own underwriting, from rehab calculators to creative finance deals. So have an amazing day, everybody. This was awesome. And if you can, please support the podcast by subscribing to us on Spotify. We're on there now. We really appreciate you guys can leave a 5-star review there. It's called Affordable Housing and Real Estate Investing. That's the podcast name. I appreciate you guys. Have an amazing day.